I'm just thinking about trolling, and specifically kind of rescuing the term a little bit for myself from all the negative connotations, because when people talk about trolling these days, it's such a widespread term. It tends to just mean anything that you disagree with, doesn't it? Just as a, anybody that's critical of you, anybody that's insulting you, or anybody who talks off topic, or anybody that asks a stupid question. Pretty much any behaviour is considered trolling, and as a result of that is considered grounds for blocking, perhaps, or the removal of comments, those kind of things. But I do think trolling, in its purest sense, does have a kind of function. And I think people can be good at it. I do think there's a real purpose to it sometimes. And as I say, it does have an actual function that you can be more or less good at. So let me just see if the way I want to get to this, actually, because I'm just trying to think about it for other purposes, for somebody doing it at work, actually. I want to think about it in terms of two things. I want to think about it in terms of what's called poetic terrorism, which is a term that was used initially by a writer called Hakim Bey. Nothing funny about gay. Hakim Bey. And so I'm going to use it in that. But I also want to think about it in terms of certain kinds of arts practices, particularly Marcel Duchamp, who is considered the grandfather of conceptual art. So I want to see if I can get to that. So, trolling, poetic terrorism, conceptual art. Let's see if I can get to all three. First off, the type of trolling I'm talking about, as I say, I want to limit my use of that term to very specific cases. And I want to think about it in terms of just a couple of examples of troll behaviour. But first off, an etymology. I had to look this up because I wasn't quite sure. But I assumed that the word troll came from Scandinavian folklore, those little troglodyte kind of creatures that live in caves or occasionally under bridges. But apparently not. It makes more sense when you find out that it doesn't, actually. It's supposed to come from fishing. It's associated with terms like trawling, where you trawl for fish. And that makes a lot more sense to me, actually. So a couple of examples of that kind of trawling, fishing kind of behaviour. And, one of the commonest trolling strategy is asking questions, isn't it? Asking questions. I know there used to be a practice a few years ago in a forum I used to go on. It was a forum which a lot of the users were very, very experienced. People had been on there for years. A lot of the conversations had been done to death, really. People knew each other really well. And a common strategy was for someone to an established user, someone who's really well known on the site, would post a naive question. And the purpose of that naive question was that, of course, the only people who would respond would be novices, newbies would respond, usually with touching sincerity. And so in a sense it's kind of trolling, kind of fishing, throwing out a lure that will attract certain people from the community, and they will show themselves, they'll reveal themselves as a newbie on the site, as someone who doesn't have, who hasn't been party to the history of the conversation that's taken place on that site. And as I say, those are the only people that would respond. So it's a very particular kind of troll comment, and it has a function. The function, as I say, is to reveal, and it's to do with revealing, as I say, the difference between those people who have a history on the site and are privy to all of the information that's been exchanged, and those who are not privy to that information, who don't have the experience, don't have the know-how, don't have the knowledge that's built up on that site. And that's important information, revealing that kind of thing. And if you don't troll for it, if you don't find out those disparities, then you can assume that everyone is speaking with the same authority, because that's what we want. I think we would want a level playing field where everybody has access to the same space and the same public square, so to speak. But at the same time, not everyone speaks with the same authority, do they? Some people know more than others. And so you need to find a way of revealing that. And this kind of trolling, where you say a naive question in order to reveal newbies, is a way of demonstrating that there is disparities in the amount of knowledge, and therefore disparities and differences in the amount of authority that should be granted to some people over other people. It isn't to say that just being around a long time makes you know everything, but there's a correlation, isn't there? So that would be one. There's another version of that kind of naive question trolling, isn't it, which I know people are familiar with, and I've seen on Free Thought blogs this strategy both being, I think, actually used, but also being people being accused of using this as a trolling strategy. And it's, on the face of it, it's the same thing. Someone will ask a naive question. Not usually a long-term user of the site, usually someone who hasn't been on the site before. They'll say, oh, I'm new here, and why is patriarchy a bad thing again? Or something like that. Make some kind of naive comment. And the purpose of that comment is to provoke a response. All trolling comments are there to provoke responses of some kind. And in that case, the naive question is there to provoke sometimes an antagonistic response, but other times just to derail the conversation into trivia. And if you're that kind of troll, the game you would want to play there is to keep the other people on the hook as long as possible, whilst also maintaining plausible deniability for yourself. So you don't quite reveal yourself as a troll, you keep people playing along, getting increasingly frustrated with you, because you keep asking these dumb questions. So what's wrong with rape again? You know, these kind of dumb questions over and over again until something happens. And the things that can happen is, of course, someone can just lose their temper with you, or you can get blocked, or someone will make an ad hominem attack against you of a certain kind. But whatever happens, again, something has been revealed. Now, it might just be done for malicious purpose. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that all trolls are benign individuals by any means. I think most of the time it is done just for devilment, isn't it, really? But in the case that I'm talking about, someone asking naive questions until an established user on the site cracks. Again, something has been revealed by that. An emotional weakness has been revealed. And in some cases, and I'm sure that people are familiar with this, in some cases people will continue to engage even after it's been conclusively demonstrated that the person they're talking to is a troll. Some people find it irresistible to keep rising to the bait that's being thrown out in this fishing expedition, even after they know that the questions are being asked with no sincerity at all. People will keep responding sometimes and getting very emotional about it, and something is revealed in that. Something is revealed about the emotional character of the person, or about their assumptions, about their biases, about their ability to control their temper, about their inability to disengage from insincere conversations. All these things have been revealed. Things which were always there, they were just invisible, they were just covert. And again, these kind of differences, people who are unable to resist the questioning of trolls, or unable to disengage from those kind of things, have, by revealing that emotional connection, have said something about their authority, have said something about where they're coming from, about what kind of a person they are speaking as, about what their personal assumptions, biases, prejudices even might be, particularly if they start using ad hominem insults. Like those are often quite revealing of what kind of a person, what kind of assumptions a person comes with. And again, you know, what initially started out as a kind of level playing field, where everyone has the same authority, everyone speaks with the, in theory at least, everyone speaks with the same access, that is disturbed. Authority is recognised as being more appropriately perhaps given to those who are intelligent enough to recognise when they're being gamed, or have enough self-awareness, self-knowledge to understand their own emotional hot buttons and to be able to work past that. So again, there's something to do with authority in the age of the internet being explored by those exploratory trolling manoeuvres. Now, and of course there's lots of other different methods of trolling, those are just the ones I'm talking about. But I think there's a relationship between that and what Hakim Bey, the person I mentioned at the top end, Hakim Bey refers to as poetic terrorism. And he's talking here about the kind of acts of civil disobedience, activist tactics for social change. And he's using a very emotive word, terrorism, to describe it. But I think there's a good reason for that, because he's tapping into some theories of how terrorism works, which I'll try and get onto. But he's saying that some activist practices, and particularly those ones that are kind of poetic, kind of artistic activist practices, certain kinds of demonstrations, certain kinds of infiltrations, work in a way that's kind of similar to the way I just described trolling. For example, he gives an account of a very simple action carried out by this chap, whether you want to call him an artist or an activist or none of the above is up to you, who did this very simple thing of just playing with toy cars in a shopping mall. Just, little toy cars. Just playing with toy cars in a shopping mall. He'd been doing it for less than 5 minutes when 3 security guards, one of whom I think was armed, appeared on the scene, asked him what he was doing, tried to get his name and address, escorted him off the premises. Now you might think, well, that's to be expected. But a shopping mall, the shopping experience generally, is usually considered benign. It's usually an open, free atmosphere in which shoppers and merchants are freely going about their business, and the shoppers and the merchants kind of feel as if they're in control of the space, and they're organising it, and the social formations are the ones that they've constructed. And it's not really until something happens to that, something disturbs the spectacle that's going on there, as you might say, like somebody playing toys until the security guards show up, that you realise this isn't that kind of space at all. This is a space which is actually highly regulated, policed by armed security guards, and everyone in it is subject to constant surveillance, obviously, because they've seen this guy on the surveillance cameras. So it's at that moment that, again, authority and power reveals itself, and this level playing field of shoppers and merchants is revealed as something much different to that. However you feel about it, that's one of the purposes. So poetic terrorism, an act of poetic terrorism like that, is a little bit like trolling. It's, I'm just playing cards, until the security guards come up and escort you from the premises, and then everybody is suddenly aware, oh, actually we are in a controlled environment here, a surveilled environment, a panopticon environment. So there's a relationship there. And lastly, I just want to see if I can just grab onto conceptual art here, because this is something I'm thinking about for other purposes right now. Conceptual art, I won't go into the history of conceptual art, but a lot of those histories as they're written tend to focus back on one particular moment in art history, right at the beginning end of the 20th century, when the artist Marcel Duchamp submitted a piece of work for the Armory show by I think it was called the Society of Independent Artists. It was a show. Now what you have to know about this, the piece of work he submitted is very famous. It was a urinal, a thing you would piss into, turned on its back, and he submitted this urinal as an artwork. Now the backstory for that is that the Society of Independent Artists were at the time kind of in revolt, or they wanted to free themselves of what they saw as a kind of elitist shackles of bourgeois art. Up to that point, end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century, art was very much associated with the moneyed elite, the aristocracy, the church, particular kind of economic formations, and and becoming an artist, getting your artwork in the museums and the art galleries and doing all those kind of things, it was a major challenge, even more than it is now. And what these guys, and they were almost probably exclusively guys, exclusively guys. What these guys wanted to do was to kind of bypass that. They wanted to say, no, we're all artists. We don't want gatekeepers to our culture. We want to have an exhibition in which you don't have to jump through those hoops, where anybody can enter their work. This is what the Society of Independent Artists did. They said, yeah, we're casting off those shackles of elitist, exclusive practices, all those practices associated with the bourgeoisie, and we'll have this totally open exhibition. Bring us your artwork and we'll put it on. This is the Armory show, the Society of Independent Artists. And then Marcel Duchamp turns up with his urinal, which he called Fountain. And what happens? The Society of Independent Artists, initially at least, refused it. They said, no, that's not art, you can't show that, sorry. And of course something really important happens at that point, I think, and it's something important that sets the ball rolling, which rolls right throughout the 20th century into the 21st, about conceptual art and about validation and authentication and all those kind of processes that art goes through. Because of course what had been revealed by this simple act, this simple naive question, is this art? It's a urinal. What had been revealed was the supposed openness, the supposed freedom, the supposed absence of any criteria, the supposed level playing field that the Society of Independent Artists had laid out wasn't level at all. They had criteria, they had assumptions, they had prejudices and biases. which you and I might agree with, but nevertheless they had them, and those things only became evident when somebody fished for them. Somebody, Marcel Duchamp in this case, put this object in place and fished for them, and for his sins he was subject to what's called the ban hammer, I believe. He was blocked and didn't get to exhibit it, at least at that time. So yeah, so I think in that sense, and I have to say, I do admire Duchamp enormously for that act, and I think that the ball that started rolling there, and which made us question all those things to do with elitism, exclusivity, and art, who says what's art, and the role of taste, and all those questions which roll out of that and are still being argued now over 100 years later, well, almost 100 years later, is really, really important. So I love that moment. It's one of my favourite moments in art history. But I think it has a lot in common with that kind of surgical strike that poetic terrorism has, where the structures of power are revealed in what would otherwise be an apparently smooth, featureless environment, just like a shopping mall. It isn't until that's challenged that the security guards appear. And I think it's also one of the functions that good trolling, and by good I don't just mean white hat trolling for good purpose, but also people that are really good at it. One of the functions that they serve, they reveal power structures that lie behind what seem to be democratic, open, unpoliced, unregulated, level playing field environments, whether that be an internet forum, the comments section of a YouTube video, or whatever. Anyhow, that was a long one. I hope you managed to stay with this ramble. Thanks very much. Goodbye.